Tech Talk on Athens State University's College of Business, KASU Radio. It's October 22nd, 2021. Whistleblower tells Congress that Facebook products harm kids and democracy. Facebook is facing a historic crisis. Revelations brought to light from whistleblower Frances Haugen, a former data scientist at Facebook, has led to what may be the most threatening scandal in the company's history. The pressure was turned up earlier this month when Haugen testified before a Senate subcommittee. She provided a clear and detailed glimpse inside the notoriously secretive tech giant. She said Facebook harms children, sows division, and undermines democracy in pursuit of breakneck growth and astronomical profits. Past controversies over Facebook's role in Russian attempts to influence the 2016 election and the social network's lax handling of user data in the Cambridge Analytica case were crises that rocked the company and spurred internal reform. But the fury that Haugen's revelations have set off is different. Haugen was an insider, making her a powerful critic. She worked at Facebook for nearly 2 years after stints at Google, Yelp, and Pinterest. At Facebook, she studied how the social network's algorithm amplified misinformation and was exploited by foreign adversaries. Haugen told Congress that Facebook consistently chose to maximize its growth rather than implement safeguards on its platforms, just as it hid from the public and government officials internal research that illuminated the harms of Facebook products. The result has been more division, more harm, more lies, more threats, and more combat. In some cases, this dangerous online talk has led to actual violence that harms and even kills people, Haugen testified. Before Haugen left the social network, she copied thousands of pages of confidential documents and shared them with lawmakers, regulators, and the Wall Street Journal, which published a series of reports called the Facebook Files. During my time at Facebook, I came to realize a devastating truth. Almost no one outside of Facebook knows what happens inside Facebook, Haugen told Congress. The company intentionally hides vital information from the public, from the U.S. government, and from governments around the world. Research shows Facebook coveted young users despite health concerns. Of particular concern to lawmakers was the impact on children by Instagram, which is owned by Facebook. Haugen has leaked one Facebook study that found that 13.5% of UK teen girls in one survey said their suicidal thoughts became more frequent after starting on Instagram. Another leaked study found 17% of teen girls say their eating disorders got worse after using Instagram. About 32% of teen girls said that when they felt bad about their bodies, Instagram made them feel worse, Facebook's researchers found, which was first reported by the Journal. Senator Marsha Blackburn, Republican of Tennessee, accused Facebook of intentionally targeting children under the age of 13 with an addictive product, despite the app requiring users be 13 years or older. It is clear that Facebook prioritizes profit over the well-being of children and all users, she said. Subcommittee Chair Richard Blumenthal, Democrat from Connecticut, echoed this concern. Facebook exploited teens using powerful algorithms that amplified their insecurities, Blumenthal said. I hope we will discuss as to whether there is such a thing as a safe algorithm. Haugen told Congress that when outside researchers and lawmakers asked how Facebook affected the health and safety of children, the company was never forthcoming. Facebook chooses to mislead and misdirect. Facebook has not earned our blind faith, Haugen told Congress. Facebook has responded that other internal research shows that young people who use Instagram feel more connected to their peers and better about their well-being. After the Journal's reporting, Facebook said it was pausing work on an Instagram product tailored to kids under the age of 13. Democrats and Republicans are actually united on regulating Facebook. At one moment in the hearing, Republican Senator Jerry Moran of Kansas turned to Blumenthal and said they should put aside their partisan differences to tackle a common goal, reining in Facebook. Haugen urged lawmakers to examine the algorithms that drive popular features like the main feeds in Facebook and Instagram. The algorithms reward engagement. In other words, when a post receives comments, and likes and other interactions, it is spread more widely and is featured more prominently in feeds instead of just featuring posts in chronological order. The engagement-based formula helps sensationalize content, such as posts that feature rage, hate, or misinformation, travel far and wide, she said. It is causing teenagers to be exposed to more anorexia content. It is pulling families apart. And in places like Ethiopia, it's literally fanning ethnic violence, Hagan told lawmakers. She added that reforms should make the platforms themselves safer, less twitchy, less reactive, less viral. One proposal now being discussed by Blumenthal would let private citizens sue Facebook and other social media companies for harm caused by their algorithms. Other legislative responses could include passing a national privacy law and strengthening safeguards for children online, two measures that have been long debated among Washington lawmakers. But lawmakers insist Hagan's disclosures are the motivation needed on Capitol Hill. Hagan stood against breaking up Facebook, a popular rallying cry in Washington. She said it would only worsen the platform's problems by turning the social network into a Frankenstein monster that would still cause harm around the world, while a separate Instagram would siphon most of the advertising dollars. Hagan says Facebook broke the law. Hagan's lawyers have filed 8 complaints with the Securities and Exchange Commission focused on Facebook's public statements about issues including what Facebook knew about how organizers of the January 6 Capitol siege used its platform, how effective it was at removing hate speech, and how Instagram makes body image issues worse. According to Hagan's legal team, Facebook executives, including CEO Mark Zuckerberg, misstated and omitted key details about what was known about Facebook and Instagram's ability to cause harm. Attorneys for Hagan alleged that Facebook violated U.S. security laws by lying to investors. The documents were also shared with state prosecutors, including the California Attorney General. Hagan's lawyer, John Tye, told NPR. Federal regulators and state prosecutors have not indicated how authorities plan to respond. Facebook is turning up the heat on Hagan, suggesting for the first time that she broke the law. Company executive Monica Bickert told CNN that the documents Hagan obtained were stolen. Federal whistleblower protections provide legal cover to Hagan in providing private Facebook documents to the SEC and Congress, but experts say her leaks to the press could trigger legal action from Facebook. I'm sure we will all be following this story closely as it continues to develop, as it involves our daily use of technology and the negative side effects that occur. Europe delivers module for first astronaut mission to the moon. The second European service module for NASA's Orion spacecraft is on its way to the USA. It is the last stopover on Earth before this Made in Europe powerhouse takes the first astronauts around the moon on the Artemis II mission. Upon arrival at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, the second European service module will be connected to the crew module. Together, they form the Orion spacecraft. The service module is a critical element for Orion. It provides propulsion, power, and thermal control, and will supply astronauts with water and oxygen. With parts made in 10 countries in Europe, there is one element that returns to American soil after testing in Germany. The service module's main engine is a refurbished engine from Space Shuttle Atlantis that will steer the spacecraft on its way to the moon. Extensive testing awaits before integration with the launcher. Artemis II will be the first crewed mission to the moon since the Apollo 17 mission in 1972. This is another big step forward to the moon for ESA. Our astronauts will fly to the Lunar Gateway aboard Orion. Meanwhile, we are working to have ESA astronauts on the moon by the end of this decade and keep our sights on Mars as the horizon goal of human exploration, says David Parker, ESA's Director of Human and Robotic Exploration. European industry is committed to deliver one service module per year. The cooperation between ESA and NASA is going a step beyond. We are a truly reliable partner, says Philip Deleu, ESA's ESM project manager. ESA is delivering up to 6 modules to NASA, with 3 more currently under negotiation for the Lunar Gateway. Airbus is ESA's prime contractor for building the first 6 service modules. The Kennedy Space Center is humming with lunar activity. For the first time, 3 Orion spacecraft will be there at various stages of assembly and integration. The first Orion spacecraft will be integrated on top of the Space Launch System rocket in its final preparations for the uncrewed Artemis 1 mission. The European service module will take the spacecraft more than 64,000 kilometers beyond the Moon in a test flight to demonstrate its capabilities. Agencies, industry, and teams from different continents are working around the clock in a tremendous international effort to take this complex spacecraft to the launch pad, said Kathy Koner, NASA Orion Program Manager. During a press event, 2 arrivals marked the Lunar Week on site, ESM-2 and the main pressure vessel for Artemis 3, which will see the first woman and the next man setting foot on the Moon. In Europe, the 3rd European service module is at the start of its integration phase, where equipment dummies, brackets, and harness will be added to the structure. Pentagon tech chief quits in frustration, says U.S. has no fighting chance against China. Whether it takes a war or not is kind of anecdotal. In a blistering new interview with the Financial Times, the Pentagon's former chief software officer said that he resigned in protest of slow technological innovation in the United States, and in a provocative twist, op-ed that China is dominating in the space, particularly at developing advanced artificial intelligence. We have no competing fighting chance against China in 15 to 20 years, Nicholas Chalain, who quit the Defense Department in September, told the newspaper in his first interview since leaving the post. Right now, it's already a done deal. It is already over, in my opinion. Chalain's complaints are numerous. He blasted cybersecurity in some parts of the U.S. government as kindergarten level, decried lack of cooperation between the U.S. military and its tech sector, and said that he had wasted his time in fixing basic cloud things and laptops. Most of all, though, he seems furious that China is pulling ahead in the realms of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and cyber attack capability. In a particularly grim critique, he complained that U.S. tech giants like Google have been hesitant to dive into particularly controversial AI research, whereas Beijing isn't held back by those pesky ethical debates. Though the Financial Times didn't mention it, Reuters' coverage of Chalain's interview also drew attention to U.S. intelligence assessments that China is poised to dominate in synthetic biology and genetics as well, a detail which likely reflects fear of another world superpower starting to remake agriculture, the natural environment, and maybe even human beings themselves. Whether it takes a war or not is kind of anecdotal, he said. This probably isn't the last we're going to hear of Chalain, who told the Financial Times he plans to testify to Congress in coming weeks. Genetics papers retracted over human experimentation scandal. Muslim Uyghurs were coerced into giving up blood samples and lied to about the process. Two genetics papers that have been published in prominent academic journals have been retracted in response to criticism that their subjects, persecuted Muslim Uyghurs from China, hadn't fully consented to the process. The studies reveal a bleak trend in which members of Chinese law enforcement or public security officials are listed as co-authors on genetics research papers, suggesting that the data came from people who were coerced or misled into giving up blood samples and therefore their genetic data, the New York Times reports. In this specific case, the International Journal of Legal Medicine retracted a paper, and Human Genetics retracted another on August 30th. But experts told the New York Times that those two papers only scratched the surface of the problem. Even with the two high-profile retractions, hundreds of these articles still remain, pointing to what the New York Times calls major failures in the informed consent process and the way that oppressed minorities are treated by academics. In this case, the studies in question were attempts by scientists to figure out how to predict a person's physical features based just on their genetic code. That's already a fraught premise, but to investigate, the scientists collected blood samples from Uyghurs who have been subjugated to mass incarceration, intense surveillance, and even forced sterilization under the guise of offering medical checkups rather than conducting research. Needless to say, Springer Nature, the publisher of both journals that just retracted papers, seems justified in concluding that the Uyghurs probably weren't told the full scope of what was being done with their blood and weren't granted a non-coercive opportunity to decline. Multiple members of the Uyghur community told the New York Times the same, that police involvement in the research meant that they were essentially forced to give blood samples and that they were never told the reason why. The documents supplied by the authors contain insufficient information related to the scope of the study for us to remain confident that the protocols complied with our editorial policies or are in line with international ethical standards, the journals wrote in their respective retraction statements. A single Bitcoin transaction creates as much waste as throwing out two iPhones, economists find. Mining Bitcoin is hugely energy intensive. Each Bitcoin transaction creates at least 272 grams of e-waste, the weight of two iPhone 12 minis, a new paper says. This is because Bitcoin miners cycle through a growing amount of short-lived hardware, the author says. They found that the average lifespan of Bitcoin mining devices is just 1.29 years. The Bitcoin network annually generates 30.7 metric kilotons of waste as mining equipment is thrown away, according to a study by economists Alex DeVries and Christian Stoll. There were 112.5 million transactions in 2020, so that equates to at least 272 grams of e-waste per Bitcoin transaction, they said in a paper. That is the equivalent in the weight of two iPhone 12 minis, as The Guardian pointed out, or that of half an iPad, according to Digiconomist. Critics have long focused on Bitcoin's enormous electricity consumption, but DeVries and Stoll said that people have thus far ignored that Bitcoin miners cycle through a growing amount of short-lived hardware. The lifespan of Bitcoin mining devices remains limited to just 1.29 years, DeVries and Stoll wrote. They said the 30.7 kilotons of waste Bitcoin produces each year is comparable to the amount of small IT and telecommunications equipment waste produced by a country like the Netherlands. The Ethereum network is trying to tackle the problem of waste from crypto mining by changing to a so-called proof-of-stake network. In that system, users put forward a stake to gain the right to verify transactions, rather than use vast amounts of computing power. However, DeVries and Stoll from the Dutch Central Bank and MIT, respectively, noted that the traditional financial system also generates huge amounts of waste from servers and bank branches to old ATMs. The 6 billion payment cards that are produced annually, with a lifetime of 3 to 4 years, illustrate the large scale, they said in the paper, published in the Resources Conservation and Recycling Journal. And that does it for this episode of Tech Talk. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great week.